Have you ever felt it, that subtle trembling inside, as if the world you thought you understood suddenly cracks open, revealing something vast, raw, and unsettling beneath? People often talk about spiritual awakening as if it's a golden doorway, a shimmering ascent straight into peace and clarity. But the truth, the real truth no one warns you about, is that awakening rarely begins with light. It begins with rupture, with a quiet collapse, with the terrifying realization that reality is far more intricate, far more alive, and far more demanding than your old self ever imagined. The moment the veil thins, when illusions start slipping away, there's a breathtaking clarity, but right behind it lies a shadow most people never mention. That shadow is not an enemy, it is an invitation, yet very few are willing to talk about this darker, uncomfortable side of awakening because it contradicts the romanticized idea that expansion is supposed to feel good. But awakening isn't a spa treatment for the soul, it's more like stepping into a chamber of mirrors, where every reflection exposes something you've avoided, minimized, or buried. And maybe you know this already. Maybe you've felt it. The strange heaviness that comes just after a moment of insight. The emotional waves that follow a spiritual breakthrough. The sense that something inside you is shedding, uncoiling, dissolving. And while people celebrate the light, no one prepares you for this intimate descent into your own depths, the part where you meet the versions of yourself you had hoped spiritual growth would erase. We've been sold a myth, a shimmering promise, that awakening is a clean escape from suffering, a linear ascent into higher vibration, a soft and effortless glide into timeless peace. The idea is seductive, of course it is. Who wouldn't want awakening to be a magic spell that fixes every wound? But this fantasy is the first trap, the subtle lie that keeps seekers orbiting around enlightenment instead of entering it. For true awakening does not dissolve your humanity, it magnifies it. It makes your pains sharper, your fears more visible, your patterns louder, not because you're failing, but because you're finally ready to see. Think of it this way. When you turn on a bright light in a cluttered attic, the light doesn't clean the room. It simply reveals what has always been there, and that's where the journey really begins. The moment you step into awareness, you also step into confrontation, not with the world, but with yourself, with the ego you've crafted, polished, defended, and mistaken for your identity. The ego is clever. It doesn't enjoy being questioned. And when the awakening begins, it doesn't dissolve, it resists, it clings, it reshapes itself, trying to absorb spirituality into its old structure, whispering things like, "I am evolving faster than others," "I'm special," or "I'm above the illusions." But awakening does not flatter the ego, it exposes it. It shows you that your identity, this little story you've clung to, is nothing more than a small wave on an infinite ocean. And the moment this realization dawns, even faintly, it hurts, it destabilizes. It confronts you with humility so profound it feels like a kind of death. This is why many people abandon the path right when they are actually beginning it, because they believe awakening should feel like ascending into the clouds. But instead, it feels like descending into yourself. It's the disillusionment that rattles you first. The unsettling awareness that the beliefs you built your life upon, those neatly arranged truths, those comforting spiritual ideas, those rigid identities, start to crumble. It feels like having the ground pulled from beneath your feet. And in a way, it is. Awakening is a demolition before it becomes a reconstruction. And just when you think you're finding your center, something else emerges from the depths, the shadow. The shadow is not the monster people imagine, it's the collection of everything you were taught not to be, not to feel, not to express. It's your unspoken anger, your jealousy, your buried grief, your suppressed desire, your forgotten wounds. You've spent years pushing these parts down into the basement of your psyche, locking them away with tight emotional chains. But energy does not disappear just because you avoid it. What is repressed becomes unconscious. And what becomes unconscious begins to rule us without our awareness. The shadow makes itself known through triggers, through relationships, through patterns that repeat like echoes, until you finally listen. Every person who irritates you, every situation that stirs disproportionate emotion, every jealousy that flashes without warning, these are not accidents, they are mirrors. reflections of the very traits you've refused to acknowledge in yourself. Carl Jung understood this well. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And this is the very heart of awakening, the part almost no one talks about. Spiritual growth is not just the cultivation of light. It is the integration of shadow. Not the elimination of fear, but the understanding of fear. Not the denial of anger, but the transformation of anger. The shadow is not the dark that destroys, it is the dark that reveals. And yet, facing it can feel like unraveling. Because the shadow carries not only your wounds but your power, your creativity, your essence, your fire. You have locked away pieces of yourself for so long that retrieving them feels like stepping into a forbidden room inside your own soul. But here's the truth that the Etheric Compass stands by, fiercely and unapologetically. You cannot ascend without descending. You cannot expand without confronting contraction. You cannot awaken without walking through your own night. And the shadow is not a detour, it is the path. The deeper you walk into awakening, the more you begin to sense the tremor of something ancient within you, something the ego has tried to silence for years. Because once the shadow surfaces, once those repressed emotions rise like long-forgotten spirits, the ego panics. It tries to grip harder, to reassert control, to rebuild the identity that awakening is slowly dissolving. And this moment, this precise tension between who you've been and who you're becoming, often marks the beginning of a profound inner battle. The ego fears dissolution more than anything. To the ego, awakening feels like death, even though it is not death at all, only transformation. But the ego doesn't know the difference. It fights, resists, clings to old stories, old defenses, old illusions. That is why you may find yourself overwhelmed with doubt, anger, anxiety, or emotional turbulence during your awakening. It is not regression, it is confrontation. The ego is terrified of losing its throne. It has spent your whole life building an identity out of labels, achievements, traumas, successes, failures. Anything to prove I exist, I matter, I am separate. Awakening unravels this illusion by showing you that you are not separate at all, that you are made of the same essence that breathes through oceans, galaxies, forests, and every human you pass. This realization isn't soft or poetic. When you first encounter it, it can feel shattering. It destabilizes the ego's entire architecture. And so, the ego attempts its greatest trick. It puts on a spiritual mask. It pretends to be awakened. It starts saying things like, I'm above negativity, I'm more conscious than others, or I can see through the illusions ordinary people fall into. This spiritualized ego is more dangerous than the ignorant ego because it hides inside concepts like enlightenment, purity, vibration, and transcendence. It doesn't want to heal, it wants to perform healing. It doesn't want to evolve, it wants to appear evolved. Many seekers fall into this trap without realizing it. They believe their journey has elevated them above struggle, above shadow, above the raw messiness of being human. But true awakening is not about rising above humanity. It is about entering it fully, seeing every corner of your psyche with unfiltered awareness, recognizing that nothing within you is unworthy or separate from the whole. And just when you think you've passed the hardest part, the universe reveals another threshold. The dark night of the soul. This is the chapter that breaks even the strongest seekers. It does not arrive gently. It comes like a silent storm, stripping you bare. It feels like losing your direction, like falling out of alignment, like being abandoned by the very light that once guided you. Everything becomes heavy, muted, hollow. Practices that once brought you peace no longer work. Meditation becomes empty. Insight becomes blurry. The world feels drained of meaning. But this isn't punishment, it's purification. The dark night is the dismantling of the final illusions you still cling to. It is the soul's way of pulling you into complete surrender. You are not meant to fix this phase. You are meant to be changed by it. You may feel isolated, misunderstood, disconnected not only from others but from yourself. But this emptiness is not void. It is space being made. Just as a forest must burn to regenerate, the psyche too must enter darkness, so its deepest truths can rise. And yes, It hurts, it confuses, it disorients, but it also restructures your entire inner world. Only in the dark can you see the faint glimmer of your inner light, the one that is not borrowed from teachers, doctrines, or spiritual highs, but forged from your own essence. The dark night of the soul is the cocoon stage, the collapse before metamorphosis. The caterpillar does not simply grow wings. It dissolves inside the cocoon, becoming unrecognizable before rebuilding itself into something capable of flight. This is what you are doing. You are dissolving. And once you let yourself fall into this dissolution without resistance, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see the illusions you once protected, the beliefs that defined you, the fears that controlled you, the narratives that shaped your self-worth. And suddenly, the pain becomes a teacher, not an enemy. The darkness becomes a womb, not a prison. But the dark night is not the only subtle trap on the path. As you begin to see more clearly, the ego may attempt a new strategy: spiritual superiority. It whispers, "Now that I see the truth, I am ahead of others. I have evolved. I have awakened beyond the ordinary mind." This is one of the most delicate illusions, because it feels righteous. It feels like progress. But in truth, it reestablishes separation, the very opposite of awakening. Pride in spirituality is still pride. The ego hides behind spiritual language because it knows seekers often won't question its motives when they feel pure. Superiority can quietly infiltrate your thoughts, thinking your perspective is the most enlightened, judging others for not understanding, believing your path is the higher one, seeing those who struggle as less awakened. This creates a spiritual bubble that isolates you from genuine connection. You float above others instead of walking beside them. You analyze instead of empathizing. You preach instead of listening. And before you realize it, you've drifted far from humility, the foundation of true spiritual expansion. Humility doesn't mean self-deprecation. It means clarity. It means remembering that spiritual growth does not make you special. It makes you human in a deeper, more naked way. It allows you to see the fragile, complex, beautiful truth inside everyone, including yourself. And perhaps the most profound shift that happens during awakening is this. You stop viewing spirituality as a ladder to climb and start seeing it as a path of service. Service is not sacrifice, it is alignment. When your heart begins to open, compassion becomes natural. You no longer help others to feel superior. You help because the boundary between you and them begins to dissolve. This is when awakening becomes real. Not when you feel enlightened, but when you feel connected. Connection does not elevate you above anyone. Connection unites you with everyone. You begin to recognize that every person you meet is reflecting a part of your own journey. Every shadow you've integrated allows you to understand someone else's shadow. Every pain you've survived becomes a reminder that others, too, are carrying burdens you can't see. The path softens you. It humbles you. It makes you more human, not less. Because the real awakening is not about transcending the world. It is about finally being able to meet the world with open eyes and an open heart. As you continue walking this winding path of awakening, you eventually reach a point where the illusions of superiority, spiritual performance, and egoic self-protection begin to feel painfully hollow. They crumble not because you force them to, but because your inner world has expanded beyond them. You start to sense something deeper, an authenticity that doesn't need to prove anything, defend anything, or compare itself to anyone. This shift happens quietly, almost imperceptibly, like dawn softening the sky before sunrise. You begin to realize that enlightenment is not a title, not a badge, not a level to unlock. It is simply the process of uncovering what has always been there. And the more you embrace your own humanity with all its contradictions, shadows, imperfections, and raw edges, the more you realize that awakening isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world taught you to shrink. And this remembering brings something profound. Compassion. Not the sweet, filtered compassion people talk about, but the fierce, grounded compassion that comes from having walked through your own storms. You understand fear because you have sat with your own. You understand anger because you have faced it within yourself without turning away. You understand grief because you have let it carve you open. This depth of inner contact gives you the eyes to see others clearly, not as enlightened or unenlightened, awakened or asleep, but simply as fellow travelers, navigating the same mysterious terrain. This is where your relationships begin to transform. No longer are they projections of your shadow or arenas for the ego to seek validation. They become mirrors of your own expansion, each connection a doorway, each conflict an invitation, each moment of tenderness a reminder of what is real. You stop needing others to fit your expectations. You stop judging their pace. You begin to perceive the invisible battles everyone is fighting, and your heart softens in ways that no spiritual technique alone could ever teach you. And yet, even with this newfound clarity, the journey does not suddenly become easy. Awakening is not a one-time event. It unfolds in spirals. You will revisit the same emotions, the same wounds, the same shadows, but each time with a little more understanding, a little more grace. You'll recognize patterns sooner, breathe through discomfort more deeply, and surrender more willingly to life's mysterious timing. This cyclical unfolding is not failure, it is integration. Growth happens in waves, and every wave reveals a new layer of your being. But perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of awakening is the idea of arriving, as if there is a final destination where peace is permanent, fear evaporates, and joy remains unbroken. This idealized version of enlightenment has misled countless seekers. It fuels the ego, traps people in comparison, and sets unrealistic expectations that lead to discouragement. True awakening, however, is not the elimination of struggle but the transformation of your relationship with it. You begin to understand that pain does not make you unspiritual. Doubt does not make you unawakened. Fear does not mean you've regressed. These experiences are simply part of being alive. The difference is that now you meet them consciously. You feel them without drowning in them. You observe them without letting them dictate your worth. And through this awareness, something remarkable emerges. Resilience, inner spaciousness, a trust in your own capacity to navigate whatever arises. This is why those who embrace their shadows become more whole than those who deny them. Because wholeness is not the perfection of light, it is the harmony between light and shadow, between clarity and confusion, between certainty and mystery. You begin to appreciate the beauty of your contradictions. You stop trying to simplify yourself into a single version. You stop pretending, and this authenticity radiates outward, drawing people into your orbit not because you shine brightly, but because your honesty is magnetic. And then, slowly, without fanfare, you begin to notice that the world around you feels different. Colors seem more vivid. Conversations carry more weight. Silence feels rich rather than empty. The mundane becomes sacred. This isn't because reality has changed, it's because you have. Your perception has softened, widened, awakened. You start to see meaning in places you once overlooked. You sense the interconnectedness between events that once felt random. Life stops being a series of problems to solve and becomes an unfolding mystery to witness. The ego, once rigid and defensive, loosens its grip. You still have an ego, everyone does, but it no longer drives you. It becomes a tool rather than a master. You use it when needed, but you no longer mistake it for your identity. And this shift brings a kind of freedom you could never have imagined at the beginning of your journey. A freedom that lives not in the absence of challenge, but in the presence of awareness. From this place, service becomes natural. Not self-sacrifice, not martyrdom, but genuine service. The desire to uplift others, to listen deeply, to live with intention, to embody love in small, ordinary ways. You realize that awakening is not measured by how much you know, but by how much love and presence you bring into the world. You recognize that the most awakened people are often not the ones who speak the most about spirituality, but the ones who move quietly with kindness, humility, and depth. And eventually, the deepest truth of all reveals itself. Awakening is not about becoming light, it is about becoming whole. Light without shadow is incomplete. The human experience is meant to encompass everything, the bliss and the ache, the clarity and the confusion, the expansion and the contraction. When you allow all of it to exist within you without resistance, you embody a wisdom that no book, teacher, or doctrine could ever fully convey. So if you find yourself in a dark chapter, trust that it is part of your unfolding. If you feel lost, trust that you are being stripped of what no longer serves you. If your ego is trembling, trust that your soul is awakening. Every step you take, even the uncertain ones, is guiding you into deeper alignment with your true essence. Awakening is not a destination. It is a lifelong exploration, a continuous unveiling, a sacred remembering. And the most beautiful part? You are not meant to walk it perfectly. You are simply meant to walk it consciously. If this journey has touched something within you, if it has illuminated even the faintest spark, then know this: the path is already unfolding beneath your feet, and every experience, every shadow, every breath is guiding you home. Thank you for walking this path of awareness, and thank you for allowing the Etheric Compass to be a companion on your sacred journey of becoming.